these are two young players that can play 4 core special teams, and also both of them have played and started games. Will have a chance to compete. Laryngitis, obviously, one of the things we felt we needed was, someone with his experience that can help on game day with the overall understanding of what we're doing and what they're doing. And so now that might move some players around.
Anthony go to Sam.
That's a scenario, and because Steph's playing, and then obviously Donnell has been at the will, but that's a lot on the plate of a rookie first-year player when he's, getting the signals, making the calls, doing all of that, and I think that's one of the things that obviously Laryngitis is very comfortable at. So we'll look at that, and then if we're moving him to Sam, what type of Sam is he, off the ball or on the ball? And I think the comment I made is we've got to be mindful and flexible enough to adapt what we're doing defensively or offensively with the signing of a player.
I know it's early draft and everything, but then what would happen to Kakaha?
Well, I know this from a year ago. We know Howe's going to play in the sub rush. So it's not out of the realm to think he can't play the jack position, that weak side end position. It's what he played in college. And get him more snaps moving forward. I know he's comfortable with it, and I know that's one of his strengths.
How do you guys feel about Coleman and that's behind the top 3 receivers?
Well, I feel good about Coleman. Now, after the initial group, there's a lot of guys that haven't played much. So we feel this draft is going to offer a few different players that we think can help in that area too.
Sorry, what kind of player is getting in Benjamin Watson, and how much do you guys want to keep him?
Well, we wanted to keep him, and they're getting. Let me talk about the person before the player. They're getting one of the best guys you'd ever want to be around. Great team leader, really good family. You check off every box. I mean, real personable. I would say available from player 1 to 53 anytime they needed help. Christmas Eve, it's in season. We're in there working, and 8:30 at night, and you hear noise coming down the hall, and it's Ben and his wife and his children, and they've got a big grocery cart full of Bibles, and they're stopping at each coach's office, at each player's office, and so obviously a strong Christian, good family man, a very, I would say, reliable player. He blocks well, he catches well. So as a tight end, he does a lot of things well. He's consistent in those areas. Of course, had a good season for us.
Was it just basically the numbers got too much?
Yeah, I think there's a price point, which. And hey, it was to Baltimore's credit, and then a little bit with us, we were looking closely at a certain amount, and as that rose a little bit north of where we were comfortable, then you're happy for the player, and then you got to begin to think about, all right, where are we going?
Sean, you guys have upgraded. You guys have upgraded linebacker. Do you feel like you need to do something in the secondary, or
We've got some young players in the secondary that, a year ago didn't even play. P.J. Wilson, or P.J. was one player I'm thinking about. Damian Swan. Those are 2 young corners in that draft. We'll have some flexibility, and yet it wouldn't preclude us from drafting a player, whether it's safety or corner. We lost Raphael Bush to Detroit, and he's a good football player. He was one of the guys that, if you said there were 3 safeties playing, he was in that rotation. But I would say that front still for us, that pass rush position, 3 technique position, there's some empty holes there, at least on paper, and that's something we got to. Those are must positions.
What do you like about Kobe Flynn? I mean, the culture and situation we're in now, keep Allen working, but what did you guys like?
I like, number one, he can run. He's exceptionally fast. Number two, I think he's a guy who's real good in creating separation with his routes. But I would say he's an elite route runner off the 2 years I watched. So I watched the last 2 years every snap. He knows the system that we're running. There'll be a little bit more vertical in it for him with regards to some of the seam routes. But he's a big target. I think he knows how to separate from defenders. So when I see him in man or in match coverage, I watch him do the right thing every time. You know, and there's games where you can watch the tape and say, man, if we threw it to him 8 times in a row, we're going to have 8 completions. But I think there's a skill set, and I think after seeing this first season, I remember just having the discussion with Mickey thinking, you know, I know exactly how we use this player, and I'm confident he'll have success.
Is he closer to what you had with Jimmy?
Yeah. Yeah, without a comparison, you'd say he's receiver first, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Can he play guard, or is he just?
No, he's played and can play guard. Obviously, we feel he's a right tackle. We feel he's a tackle. I shouldn't even say that. But as we work through this process of free agency and the draft, we still want to have the flexibility to get our best 5 on the field.
How much kind of player are the Jets getting in Kyrie Robinson, and how strong was there any interest in bringing him back?
Yeah.
You've spoken highly of him in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. He's strong. He's a physical runner. When he came to us, all in the spring, we don't get the opportunity with any type of shoulder pad work to see what a player can do. And he was one of those that just came to the rookie tryout, and then got signed. And then he was borderline whether he went to camp that first year, and he did. When the pads came on, though, and I think you'll see the same transition, when the pads came on, you got a much different player than you thought you were getting. You thought you might be getting more of a scat back or someone who's fast in space, but I would say he's extremely physical style of runner. Not just like Ivory, but if I described Ivory, I'd say he's a physical back. I think Ivory has some versatility as a receiver. I know he's working on rehabbing the injury, and you'll get someone who's tough and ready to go.
At guard, how much does maybe drafting a Jari and drafting a Carl Nicks, and they played really early in their career, how much do you feel like if you draft a guard, he could possibly come in and start right away?
Well, it's part of the equation. We look, there's a few linemen in this draft. There's a few of them that are tackles that you might move to guard. Some of them, I'm sure, will play early for some of these teams. And if that opportunity presents itself for us, we wouldn't hesitate in the selection. And then you got to let them kind of earn that tick. But I think there's a few of those guys that can do that this year.
Sean, are you surprised at all that Doug Marrone hasn't been able to latch on and find another head coach?
No, I'm not surprised. I still think it'll happen here. There's only 32 of them, and there's a lot of competition for each team to find the guy they're looking for. Doug and I stay in touch, and I think he's doing a good job in Jacksonville, and I think it won't be a year or two from now where all of a sudden his name's surfacing. I think that'll happen.
Sean, what qualities do you like about Dan Campbell as a coach?
Well, the same qualities I liked about him as a player. He's tough. I think he's a great worker. He's always a good team guy. So all my experience with Dan, really, the Giants, the Cowboys, even at the Saints, has been that of him being a player. And yet from afar, I had a chance to see him coach in Miami and watch the success he's had, and then even in a short period of time, becoming the head coach there. So that was an easy decision for me because I just know how he is, and I'll know he's a great teacher. Already, I've just had a chance to see a number of things with him in our staff, and there's an intensity he brings to what he does. And I think really by and large, we're looking for people with passion, and I know that he has it. And he had it the day he arrived in New York, my first year there. It's a good addition for us. Yeah, absolutely. We're hopeful to get that done. I think he gave us a shot in the arm last year towards the end when we needed it. Film was good, but yes.
It seems like a lot of these college guys are saying they're going out to dinner with you and your coaching staff. What do you get out of doing it in that setting as opposed to maybe a more formal?
Well, we started. This is nothing new. The workouts, let's say tomorrow, we get in tonight and we go out for dinner with a group of them, and hopefully, almost always in that setting, once everyone loosens up, you kind of get a beat on how the dynamic of the conversation goes, their personalities. Maybe you have some tough questions to ask them. It's just some extended time where they're in that room and you get to know them a little bit more. I remember going all the way back to when it was Hawk, Matthews, and Maluga, and Bush. That draft, all of them being out at the same dinner and just visiting with them, and all of them ended up being good football players. But you just try to get a feel for their personality, and you're trying to learn more about who the guy is.
Are you guys at a point where Josh Hill signs an offer sheet? I mean, you kind of got signed 2 tight ends. I mean, is it to the point where you figure he's going to be with the Bears?
Yeah, I wouldn't count on that. The good news is we control that with 5 days. Mickey and I spoke about it last night, and we'll talk in depth probably today. But good news is that you have some time here to look at what you want to do and how you want to maneuver it to do it.
Is it dangerous to try to build a defense through free agency, get your main players, or is it better to build your young core and kind of get guys that can fill in?
I'd say this, it's dangerous if you're not drafting players that are starting for your defense. I think we always take the approach where, hey, can we fill in a player if it fits? We've signed some young linebackers and a veteran linebacker to a group already where we have Steph, Howe, Donald Ellerby. I mentioned how, we're playing 70% of the snaps now in the sub, and so he's going to have more rush opportunities. But I'm excited about the draft, just about the top end of this draft and what we've seen so far.
Coach, when you look at the league at a macro level, we're here talking about officiating, competition committee, how to make the game better, how to make our officials better. We talk about diversity and how to get more coaches involved, how to develop a greater bounty of coaches, more African American coaches, giving women more opportunities. We talk about experimentation with the game, how to make technology, whether we put a chip in a football, whatever. Why is there not a spring league, a developmental league, so you could address all those things?
2 weeks ago, we were discussing what was the World League, and there are a lot of coaches, a lot of officials actually that are playing and working now that came from that league. And then you really discuss Canada. It's our one spot. If we're not looking at Canada, anywhere else we're looking, there's a projection. Well, he plays basketball, he might do this. I think you're going to see that at some point. Now, it may be an international spring league, but one in which the clubs can call on it at any time to infuse a player into their roster midstream. But I think just as importantly, clubs can call on for employers other than players. I think the officiating, I think there are a number of things that gives you, and even if it's 6 or 8 that 32 are drawn from, you know, back with the World League, I don't know how many teams there were, but a lot of people that were involved in that league, ended up in our league at some point.
I mean, even if you create a Kurt Warner and a Jake Delhomme, I mean, how much? I don't care how much of a sunk cost it is.
Right.
What
There's a value in
is
that.
We got quarterbacks getting
Right.
$40 million guaranteed. They played 7 games.
Right, there's a value in that. And look, and I was, you're preaching to the choir. My first year, I was up in Canada. I was in the Arena League. I was trying out for the Chiefs. You know, I felt like I'd hit every location. But I do think just the quarterback position alone, the repetitions they get in development, because I believe Delhomme, Warner, Brad Johnson, those are all just a handful of guys that I can recall coming from a league other than ours and then having success. Now, we've seen that with Theismann. We've seen it with Moon. We've seen it with
Even Flutie had to go there for a while and come back.
Yeah, we've seen it from the CFL, but I do think there'll be something, and I think it'll be under our league's umbrella.
Do you have any sense how it gets from a back burner issue to a front burner issue? Because I ask about it every year in the spring. Well, it's not on any agendas. We kind of talk about it informally, but
Yeah. I don't have a sense on how that gets done, but I'm not so certain it's going to tie into this European, this world market.
Sean, it doesn't do you guys any good now, but what do you think about the timeout rule?
I think it makes sense. I mean, the better question is, do you try to ignore it? So you don't have any timeouts, you're trying to call one. Do you try to ignore it? But if you get caught off guard, which would be very easy to do, someone calls timeout and you grant them a timeout, obviously that's when the penalty incurs. The better question is, would you just grant them the timeout they don't have and enforce a penalty? I don't know the NBA rule. Do they try to ignore the timeout they don't have?
I think you got to be aware of how many you have.
Yeah, you
No, right. But I'm saying, so you try to call one, does the official try to?
Yeah, they'll tee you.
Like Chris Webber.
So the point I'm making is, though, it's automatic.
Yes.
They're not going to say you don't have any, continue to play.
Yeah.
So it's a little different than ours.
Yeah.
And I think that I understand why, but I think we got to keep finding ways to make it simpler for the officials so that they're better at officiating what they do. And there's a point where you could say, well, if someone calls timeout, boom, clock stops, and then enforce the penalty. So the official doesn't have to tie rubber band around 3 fingers and know that they've used them all. But obviously, I think the rule makes sense.
How much are you preparing for the possibility of hard knocks, or are you?
No, there's nothing to prepare for, and we really haven't discussed it lately. You know, there's not a lot you can control there. I think that Ryan brother combo is going to be tough to beat there up in Buffalo. So
I don't think they want it.
I know they don't. Yeah, shoot daily. I mean, Mickey will show me a text. I know he and Tom have had quite a bit of discussion in the last week and a half, but I would say ongoing now. And it always takes a little longer than you want it to, and they're never the same. You know, this one's a different type of contract and negotiation than the last one, and that's part of it. But I know that there's been quite a bit of dialogue.
With Curtis Johnson, what jumps out to you? Who he is and so on.
So CJ and I were together at San Diego State, and he did an internship with us at the Giants. I've known him 20-some years. So when I got hired at New Orleans in '06, he was my first hire. He's from New Orleans. His dad was a councilman there. CJ was coaching in Miami of Florida. He's hard on his players. They respect him. They care for him. But you need to be at the very beginning of your very first OTA when the very first horn blows, and it'll just tell you everything you need to know. I mean, I think the players really feel like he's helping them improve daily, and so he's one of those guys where, as loud as he is and as hard as he is on them, and over the year they're always around his office. They gravitate to his office. I think he's a tremendous teacher.
Is there a guy or two in your time there that you think his influence really?
Pick one. Colston. First draft, he was Colston's first mini camp. These guys would remember he had back problems. He was on the ground, and I don't remember Colston on the ground as much as I remember CJ yelling at him on the ground. But I think he touched the lives of a lot of those players. I know Marcus, and I know even Joe Horn and Lance Moore and Devery Henderson and Robert Meacham. There were a number of guys that would stay in touch with Curtis and would, I think, say the same thing I'm saying. I think they would say, man, he was a coach that cared about us, and it was hard on us. And he was an equal opportunity get after your butt guy. Just because you were a starter, I mean, it went from A to Z. But he too is passionate, and I think that's what sets him apart. A good man. He's one of those guys that would just be on the bike reading the Bible at 6 a.m. and you felt like you were the first one there, and CJ's on like he's been there for an hour.
Sean, why do you think things didn't work out with Brendan Hassett?
I think there's a handful of reasons. I think we weren't good enough overall as a defense. Our front struggled. I asked the same question. Look, this guy just won a Super Bowl in New York. So obviously the pass rush, it's that perfect storm, and the surrounding parts for us weren't as strong as they needed to be. I think that at times some of the under coverage, there'd be a play that you might see on tape and it would appear that it's Brandon's play, and it's one of the inside linebackers' play. And it's gotten to a point probably where he's at in his career. It was important, as a coach, you kind of have a vision of how you want something to unfold, but you got to let that happen. For us to have had success, one of those things last year defensively was for him to have played well, and us to have given him a chance to play well, because he's a leader that's wanting to lead, and it's hard to when you're becoming a target. It's hard to do that. But I think there were a lot of hands in that specifically, and look, no different than the quarterback that is not getting the time. I think for a defense secondary, that clock in the head for the passer has to be a little bit quicker, and all of a sudden you'll be amazed at the balls that become available.
Did injuries at all change maybe the vision for him at some point and start putting players out?
No, I think the vision, we always felt he could come inside and play over a tight end on third down. We've seen him do that. We've seen him do that at a couple places. So it was really, when we were healthy, how are we going to deploy and play Delvin Breaux? Because that was the the surprise that all of a sudden you have Keenan, you have Delvin, you have Brandon, and so I was trying to figure out, hey, how are we going to get our better players on the field?
Sean, last year you were at this, you talked about trying to play a different way that would put Drew in a situation where he didn't have to score 35 points, or he didn't feel like he had to score every possession. The defense could do its part. Where are you?
We didn't do a good job of that, right?
That would seem to be the case. Like, how much of it is like improving the talent versus creating the right culture and defense and your accomplishment?
I think I like the makeup and the culture right now of our guys. The young players we have on that side of the ball and some of the veteran players, we just need to add more of them. We need to have more of them.
Can you do that more often?
I think we have a chance to. We're going to try. We're going to try. If you said, hey, what specific areas, I would say we need to find somebody that can rush the passer. I think we can find that in this draft. We need to find help in that defensive front seven, and I think we can find that in this draft. There's that proverbial must, need, want list, but there's a few musts here on that side of the ball, though. 3 technique, pass rusher. We've addressed some spots over at linebacker, and there's still a need for a safety. But I think we can. And certainly it can't be where it was last year.
We talked about being amazed by what Drew accomplished, given being the quarterback, the size he is, and now it's how does he accomplish this, the size he is, and the age he is. And what's unique about this guy that he's able in your system?
Well, I think we just saw a guy like Manning retire. We've talked about Brady, and there's some common threads with these type of players, and it's how they take care of their body, how they sleep, how they diet, the nutrition. I mean, from what I read, they're all over the top anal with preparation, but I think the same approach they take during the season with football, I think they take that same approach with their life and their health and their recovery in the off-season away. And so you play a few more years. You play longer than the average because you're not the average. You're the exception. You're in every way, shape, or form someone who is constantly looking to improve your training, to improve your game. And I think that's the one common thread with a few of those players.
Sean, is it important to you to coach in one place for a long time?
Yeah. I said this in the off season. This is where I see myself coaching. I've got my briefcase somewhere, and another contract there that's going to be for another 5 years, and it's something that we've worked on, Mickey and I, and Dennis Lauscha. You kind of feel there's so much of you in there that I don't see myself working anywhere else.
Is that signed?
Nope, not yet. So it's not breaking news, but the point is that was something that began when the season ended, and it's a good thing. There's been really good stability and consistency in that ownership. We just had dinner with Mr. B last night, Mickey, and I think that it doesn't guarantee anything, but it gives you a chance, and it's been very functional.
Bill Parcells is one of your, if not the mentor for
Yeah.
you, and his adage was, you always got to stay one step ahead of the possible.
Absolutely.
And he bounced.
We talked about it.
All right. So that's you're taking a different road
Yeah.
than that.
Yeah.
Did he have any influence on making? It's your choice, but in your conversations with him, did anything kind of pop out that?
No, he's always just a matter of fact, and so the discussion might shift hey, this is what we're going to do, and then very quickly he'd say, well, how are you fixing that defense? You know, so it was always on to the next challenge. You know, in the off season, if there generally when we speak about football, but once in a while there's a conversation about something else. But it's this time of the year that if you're calling him and just saying, hey, guess what? Connor turned 16, he can drive. Bill would say, what are you doing at 3 technique? Like, he would hear you, but he didn't hear you. And so he would stay very focused to the job at hand. And we talked quite a bit about the topic we were just on, time frame, at a place. Now, there's a lot more moving parts today than there used to be. And so if you want to coach another team, just keep your job for 4 years, 5 years in our league, and you're going to be coaching another team right where you're at. And I think that's changed a little bit.
Sean, if this contract isn't breaking news, then what is it?
Hadn't it already been broken? Or
Just that you were going to resign.
so I'm planning on it. Just
Okay.
I think soon. I just got it. So I mean, I don't like walk around and carry it. I just, when you brought it up, I started thinking, man, did I bring that with me, or did I leave that like in the hotel somewhere? And then I started getting nervous.
What does another 5 years mean?
Another 5 years means a lot. You know, for our program, we're 16 now, 16, 17, 18, 19 through 2020. It's that stability and look, the vision for us to find success and get back into the postseason. I know there's nothing worse than coming to the owners meeting. That first one you're in, they kind of go season in review by NFL films, and it's why we do it. You know, it's the excitement. We've had years where we've taken it for granted. 6 was a special year. It was unique. 9, 10, 11, 13, and yet sometimes you find yourself spending more time on trying to shake 15 or 14, you know, more time on why we weren't good enough. And we've got to be better at the end of games. That's for sure. We finished, and in the last 2 years, lost some games, lost a number of them in the last 5 minutes of the game. But defensively, Dennis and the staff, they've got their hands full. But I think we'll be able to add the right pieces.
Is this accurate?
Yes. Can we read that to everyone?
Well, let me tweet it first.
All right.
That's a first.
What's soon? There was a lot of speculation at the end of last season that Drew might not be back. Drew might not be back. Did you ever see that being a reality or a possibility?
No, I didn't, and yet I understand it. When we do get accustomed to certain windows, and I think I know this. Back to that triangle, I know Mickey felt comfortable about where we were going. I too felt the same way, confident, and I know Drew has, and so. There's never that time during the season where all of a sudden you just sit down and have one, you know, a topic will come up, there'll be something written, and we've kind of got a certain plan of attack after the season. Mickey and I met for the better part of 2 days, and those meetings went well. So I don't think so. I think we were confident that we would be where we are right now.
How significant is it in your mind that not only are you going to get a new deal done sooner, but that Drew will be a part of that too? He's going to have a contract.
Yeah, I think that's important. You know, there are none of these storybook endings where we all just work these and then just one day just. But he's playing at a high level, and I think our jobs as teachers, you get excited about that because, man, you want to see and take advantage of someone and his skill set, and the first order of business is trying to stop people. But I think that consistency has been a very important thing for us. It's helped us tremendously offensively, I know. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't like the basketball analogy because when I think of basketball fouls, I always think of, well, we've got some to give here. This is a place to give a foul, and I think we're talking about an entirely different. This is a personal foul, so we don't want to give any of those. I don't think we want to use the analogy you've used 4, or there's 2 and you got 1, and then pretty soon. So I don't like that, and I don't like that it would have only applied twice in the last 3 years. I mean, no, in place.
All right.
That rule would have only been used twice in the last 3 years, and so I want to see more of a team-by-team breakdown of personal fouls because the numbers are up a little bit, and it's a league problem when that happens, and yet, I can recall being at the Saints and Roman Harper gets one, and man, it was every once in a while you have one you look at and you're pissed at your team, a little embarrassed. In that moment, it's a Saint issue. And when we're watching the Beckham Jr. and the Norman, that's a Giant issue or a Panther issue. That's not the norm. And so when that happens with your children, you're embarrassed and mortified, and then you grab their back of their neck and you bring them in. You say, we're not going to allow that. And so I think I don't like the idea of 2 and you're out, because I just think it gives the impression I'm late in the third quarter, fourth quarter, we're up 20, I can use one. I don't want any of these, right? And I think that just the introduction of it as that, I think could have an adverse effect. Does that make sense? Pardon? I don't know that we need a proposal. I don't know that we. I think we need to change the behavior, but I don't know that we need a proposal specifically to do that. I think we can do that at the club level. I believe that.
Sean, do you use analytics in coaching?
In a lot of different areas. Obviously, there's the two most common areas would be self-analyze. What are we doing with this personnel group? What are the percentages run pass? I'll ask that question a lot. What are we doing then down in distance run pass? And then what are we doing by formation run pass? And then defense. So analyzing ourselves, number one, and then analyzing what are they doing with all those same questions.
More of that than
the both. Data that you would. But I'm not looking at when to decide to go for it on fourth down, because the flaw in the challenge in analytics, doesn't account for what if your left tackle's getting his ass kicked by the defensive end. There's nowhere in there that factors that in, and yet it's very powerful. Because much like if we're educated and go into a casino and we want to just have our best chance at winning, then we've got to understand some basic fundamental rules of blackjack. It's 16, I've got to take a hit, and so we don't want to be playing a game where we're flying by the seat of our pants. And so 2nd and 10 needs to mean something based on an analytical study. It needs to mean something for me if it's us that's 2nd and 10 and they're thinking screen draw, or it needs to mean something if it's the opponent who's 2nd and 10. There needs to be some analysis that at least gives us, we can't defend it all every play. So the idea of it is to narrow down the field, right?
What kind of player are the Lions getting in Rafael?
Smart. I think physical. I think he's a good team guy. I think he's a pretty good leader. I didn't want to lose him, you know. But I think smart and tough. I know he's been nicked up, but I like him. I like him.
Sean, when you agree to a new deal, what are the emotions? Is it because it sort of seemed like it was going to happen after the press conference? It seemed like it was going to happen. Is it like a formality, or are there a lot of emotions coming?
No, it was after that. It was a formality. I don't want to say a formality, but we kind of knew that that it was going to happen. And honestly, we're in the middle of free agency and working on a few of these defensive players. And at some point, Mickey said, "Hey, I got to get this to you." And I said, "Yeah." I mean, I wasn't like waiting every day, like, where's the paperwork? Because there's a protocol with the attorneys. So I think for us, it was a formality after that point, that last week at the end of the season. You know, in other words, it would get done. And actually, I don't know why it's in this briefcase and why it's here and not at home. No, I'm not going to sign it here.
I'll look over it.
I'll look like the college recruit with I can put my hat on and say, I just keep everything in the one briefcase. So, but no, I think that stability, obviously, I don't take for granted, and I very much appreciate the opportunities we have to coach and to work with players and to work within the framework of a good group, good organization, and you know, we're all fortunate to be doing something we love.
John, the Lions secondary has been significantly better since Tony came in the past couple of years. So just from working with him, like, how much do you think he'd be capable of becoming a coordinator?
I think he will be. Tony's one of those bright guys. What I like is, you know, glass is always half full. So he's an optimistic guy. He'll take whatever he has and put his spin on it and make it the best he can. So he's someone that he's not a dwell on or woe is me, but he's more of a, I think, you know, we're going to be pretty good, and I'm not surprised to see the success he's having. I don't know if his time with Raphael overlapped at all. I'm sure it maybe did a year.
No, I think it was. He came in right after Tony left.
He just missed.
Yeah.
But there's been a couple players there. You know, over the years, there was 4 or 5 different guys and maybe 3 coaches, and I think that's how our league is sometimes. You know, there's a group over in Chicago now. Our old GM, Foxy, of course, I've worked with. Our cap guy, Joey Lane's there. Our health nutritionist gal, Jen Gibson's there. It's really a small league as it pertains to turnover and where employees and where players go.
You were actually on, you guys won that playoff game, but you've been on the receiving end of one of Calvin Johnson's greater games. I mean, what do you think the NFL's losing with him out?
I don't like being on the receiving end. But you're probably right. Listen, he's a tremendous player, so unique to what we're accustomed to as a receiver. The catching radius is something that stands out. You know, you go back into the 70s and you had to defend Harold Carmichael, and it was the early beginning of this high point fade, you know, in Philadelphia, and everyone's in position doing everything right, and then he just jumps up and catches it, and then all of a sudden years later you add that with a guy that's much faster, and much quicker, but he has those same components in regards to where he can locate the football. And I mean, it's the one thing that's real simple is that the quarterback looks at that weak safety, and if he doesn't see him move to Calvin when the ball snapped, he can throw it that way. You know, there's some simple things you can do with a guy like him at X, and they've done a very good job of that.
Just one more question on the contract. It's worth how much?
Yeah, just walking through it and just looking at it.
The briefcase is well zipped up, it appears.
I got one other topical thing for you. How much more difficult is it to evaluate or develop quarterbacks, maybe coming out of the college, the spread system now? Then how has that changed?
I think this. I hear occasionally the concern. Obviously, there's certain ways for a guy to develop. I'd say that to some degree there's less of those opportunities because there's not an additional league. It's a position that really only develops one during a game at that moment because only one's playing. And yet I would say the position's healthy. We're going to have our next stars. They're going to come to us, and if they come to us from the spread, then there'll be, you know, a transition as to what the offense is doing and what they're able to do. But I'm never that alarmist or feel like, where are they all going? They're here. These young ones that are entering. We just saw Cam Newton have arguably one of the better years the quarterback's had in the history of the game. We're seeing right now in their prime, the Aaron Rodgers and the Flaccos and that younger group, and obviously you have an older group, and I think that this year's draft will provide, you know, the question is, does it provide one or does it provide four? I'm not of the belief that player this, and this, just plug them in. If you don't get them in this round, you get them in that round. Well, what happens when only two of the three, or one of the three really turn out to be? So the trick now is figuring out which one of those players, not just quarterback, but which one of those linebackers, because oftentimes in dialogue, there's an assumption that all of these players are going to fit somewhere when the reality is at least half are not going to fit at all. But I think we've become accustomed to handling in the transition of, and I think our league's changed some. I think that spread conversion is a little easier because I think we're in shotgun a lot too.
On a similar note, actually, why do you think offensive tackles struggle with that transition out of college?
I don't think. I mean, obviously the rush is better, but see, I think tackle is an easier position to evaluate than it was 15 years ago. I think linebacker is a much more challenging position in a conventional form. So we get tackle film, and it's brilliant. You get to see them. Now, there's a handful of things you don't see, but you get to see them stay in front of a guy or not. And where I think 15 years ago that was much more difficult. There was a lot of projection. So it changed over the last 10 years, and some positions become a little easier to evaluate, others not. But
what is it about linebacker that's more difficult?
I think you see a player in college, for the most part, that is in space constantly, right and left, but you can go to Alabama, you can go to a few of these schools and all of a sudden see him fit the A-gap the way you want. And so it's not difficult seeing, it's just difficult sometimes seeing what you think they're going to have to do for your team as well. And it's a position that has gotten smaller as the game has been spread out more.
Seen them do both, basically.
Yeah.
They do one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. You see him playing a lot more in space now.
Thanks.
Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
Robertson, that's done.
It's not officially done, so that comes up last night, and then Mickey texts me, we're not supposed to say anything about it. I'm like, oh. I've already talked to the player. So here's a good way to put it. It's in the works. They've got to work out some final details, and we've got to create that space. So, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.